The world has dramatically changed within this last year through the COVID-19 pandemic. And with that specifically, the way we work and how teams are collaborating has changed dramatically as well. I'm Beth Motter here with ZDNet, here with Sid Rayos, staff software engineer and technical lead in the revenue department organization at Twitter. Hi, Sid. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Beth. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So work's dramatically changed. And honestly, everything that we've done here lately has just really changed within the last year. With that, a lot of companies are opening positions for remote employees. What kind of challenges are engineering teams facing by hiring remotely?
I think that's a great question. I think as the world has gone remote, most companies are just trying to figure out how to capitalize it and solve the challenges of the remote environment. And that the way I like to think about it is dividing the problem within the life cycle of a software engineer's tenure at a company. So you can think of it as a problem that's divided for interviewing, onboarding, mentoring, and even offboarding. So each company is trying to figure out how to segment all of this life cycle and solve each of them at the same time. So if you ask about how this has changed, especially interviewing, one of the biggest challenges is companies are seeing 5 times, 6 times more resumes for every position that they're putting out for, because everyone's realizing as soon as you remove that filter off, you have to be located in city X. The amount of people applying for jobs is tremendously high. Then moving on, if you think about just interviewing, every company is trying to figure out what is the best process to interview someone and only look at the metrics that really do measure someone's performance at a company. And winning companies will be able to filter out the noise in a remote first interview, understanding what are the limitations that an interviewee has and filtering all of that noise out just to get the signals of someone's performance, future performance at a company. So those are some of the key challenges that companies are facing today with especially interviewing, resume screening, and the companies who are able to scale these solutions out to accommodate for the demand that's coming in would be the winning ones.
Yeah, so you mentioned it, filtering out all of that noise, and there's going to be so many different applicants. What do we know what that noise is? Do we know what kind of the winning solution is to find the best employees now that we have just this massive amount of talent searching for jobs?
Right. So if you look back at pre-remote work, you generally companies would try to do is they would have a technical screening round, a hiring manager screen, and then they would try to bring the employee to the company, to their premise. Now, given everything is remote, the part that has changed is you never get to meet the person. So understanding deeply about what are some signals that you were previously collecting that you're not able to collect, and what are those signals that are actually just noise. So for example, if you're interviewing someone and there's technical difficulties and perhaps there's a culture barrier, there's a noise barrier. So understanding all of these and being inclusive of everyone's differences, the situations they're currently in, and understanding what are the key things in someone's interview process that are just a result of where they are and what technologies they have access to, and filtering all of those things out and only focusing on here's the problem that we asked them and here's how they answered, are the winning strategies by far.
Okay, so once you make your pick, once you filter out all of that noise and you've gone through and you've decided who you want to hire, what does training look like in this remote
Mm,
world? How do you implement that digitally now?
right, right. So training is one of the most important aspects of having an employee. Training is essentially the first impression you would have in a professional relationship with someone. And we know by data that if your training process is not structured well, you would see a large number of employees being unhappy with the company and end up leaving. So if you're in it for the long run, and if you want your employees to stay over the course of multiple years, one of the best things you can do is invest your time and resources into creating an A+ onboarding experience. Um, one of the major problems in a remote first world is making the employee feel connected to the environment and spending time in having them acclimated into the company culture. Um, and one of the most common reasons for that to not happen is employees often feel discouraged or disconnected to the team, and they end up essentially leaving. So some things that I believe leaders in these companies could do is really invest the time. So for example, if a new employee is joining on day one, the team and the manager should just clear up their whole calendars. And essentially just what we have seen work is you sit in a virtual room where the new employee, because day one is the day where you have questions as a new employee every 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Oh, I don't have access to this tool. I am unable to access my email. And having that support network of there's this whole team sitting in this virtual room where I could just go and quickly ask this question really helps that experience. So investing heavily into the time. The second is generally a company is a place where people come to form a lot of professional relationships. And as managers and leaders in the company, it's more of a pronounced role at this point to ensure that your new employees are able to be exposed to that environment where they're able to create these relationships. So acting as a catalyst into enabling someone to meet other folks at the company, introducing them to folks who are working in similar problem spaces, ensuring that there's enough face-to-face video time of the new employee with the team, and they're understanding what the company values are, what the culture is like. So all of this burden is suddenly a lot more pronounced on leadership. Some employees are able to actively seek out these kind of professional relationships, but I think with the remote first world, it's more and more the job of manager and the leaders in these companies to be able to expose these individuals to such opportunities.
So with that, it almost sounds like the manager roles are maybe changing a little bit. Is that something that these large scale companies need to be addressing, is maybe some different trainings and stuff for their managers to make this remote work?
Absolutely, I think so. I wouldn't say the actual role of the manager changes. I think how they execute on that promise that they have to the employee changes. Because previously, if a new employee joins, there's all these social structures already set up in place for them to be exposed to a lot of new opportunities. Uh, Something that I like to think about is chance meetings. For example, a lot of opportunities in my career were essentially me just going and getting coffee and like talking to someone about a problem, and then realizing, oh, that's something interesting and I would like to work on it, and then asking my managers about the opportunities. Now that's all out of the window. So now the role of the manager is more finding these opportunities and very explicitly answering questions of employees and connecting them with multiple employees so that those opportunities are still present.
Yeah, that human connection with that coffee break or that lunch break, that was something that I don't think was really foreseen when all of this kind of happened, and that has been a major portion of work life that has seemed to be missing.
Mhm.
So adjusting from that, and then just bringing in these new hires, and so they've been there a year now. How do companies correctly and accurately monitor productivity and performance remotely?
Mm. So I think it's two aspects. One of them is pure like from a mentorship perspective. Um, I think almost every leading company in Silicon Valley has some kind of mentorship program. I think what everyone is trying to figure out is how do you run this effectively and at scale in a remote first world. Um, the challenge is to be able to tailor your mentorship program and help your employees exceed into their areas of expertise by tailoring your mentorship program. By what I mean by that is understanding what your employee exactly needs and how often. Uh, some folks like more video time. Some folks just like getting feedback over email. Some folks like feedback often. So understanding these very human aspects of someone and tailoring your mentorship and your feedback experience based on exactly on that. So as you see a huge set of employees, they need feedback consistently, week over week over week. Some are a lot more on the shy perspective where they're more likely to respond well to feedback given once a month or 30 days. So I've seen companies who are able to tailor their mentorship experience based on this new world are a lot more successful in being able to course correct the trajectory of an employee to ensure it's always positive. Um, Second thing is having some structure in being able to measure the performance of an employee. So having 15-day check-ins, 30-day, 60, 90-day check-ins, and enabling the employee to set goals for themselves. So setting expectations often and setting expectations early is one of the key things that you could do in the remote first world. Any feedback that is a surprise to an employee is a failure on the manager. Any employee should never be surprised by any feedback. And in a remote first world, it's often easy to forget or not give feedback often because when you're in a social setting, it's often you see someone, you're like, oh, let me remind them of that email they weren't able to send last week. However, in a remote first world, you have to be extremely explicit about having that conversation. Another thing that has changed quite a bit is how people perceive meetings. I've seen in a lot of companies, the culture these days is unless you have a specific agenda for a meeting, you're better off skipping it. However, for mentorship, feedback, and these very one-on-one meetings between the manager and the employee, it's important to never cancel a meeting, even if you do not have an agenda. Because what happens often is the employee just doesn't have an agenda for a week or two or three, and then you haven't seen them for a month and you just have absolutely no clue what's going on in their lives. Are they happy with the work? Are they unhappy with the work? Is there something going on? So the job of the manager is now to read between the lines of what's going on in a world where you absolutely have no visibility into the employee's health, their happiness, and their well-being. So having that very explicit meeting timeline and connection is extremely important.
Yeah, it goes back to just not having those coffee breaks, not having those quick pass bys. You don't really know exactly how a person's doing. Sid, is there anything I didn't ask that you would like to touch on?
I think that covered it pretty well. Yeah, setting expectations, performance management, mentorship. I think that covers it all. Yeah.
Yeah, mentorship isn't really one that a lot of people, I don't think that's been talked about as much, and
Mm-hmm,
that's really interesting to bring up, and it
mm-hmm,
makes a really good point, especially starting off somewhere new. You're probably feeling pretty alone, um, in this world of being remote where so many are already feeling really alone. You don't want to feel isolated at your job, and that's I
mm-hmm,
think that's a really good point.
mm-hmm.
So thank you, Sid. Everything was super valuable. I really appreciate it. And for all things remote work, all things tech related, be sure to stick with ZDNet. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.